Hey YouTubers, and welcome back to another discussion video. Now today we're going to be doing something a little bit different on this channel, but I think it's going to be a really interesting discussion for you. And today I am joined by Mike from Laughingstock Media. Mike, do you want to say hi to everyone?
Hey guys, it's Mike here from Laughingstock Media, and once again I am doing this intro, and it is very synonymous with me, I guess.
I think it definitely is. I mean, I know that they know what you sound like and how you say hi. But anyway, guys, today we're going to be talking about anime movies, live adaptations made here in the US, because obviously Japan does them all the time, but we don't necessarily get them a lot in our environment as moviegoers. And just to start us off, what I want you guys to do is, if there is an anime out there that you guys think that actually really should be adapted into a live action film, go down in the comment section below and tell us exactly what you think that is. And I'm going to pose that question over to Mike. Mike, do you have any other thing that, just to start us off, what would the thing be to see adapted into anime would you like to see?
I would like to see his backstory for Janemba, because clearly he's the best villain in all of Dragon Ball with the greatest motivation ever. But no, I mean, everyone knows what I'm going to say first, and I'm just going to say it because why not? The anime I want to be adapted most into a movie is Yu Yu Hakusho. Yeah, Yu Yu Hakusho would be a really good idea to adapt into a movie because it's very plot-focused, plot-oriented, and, you know, it seems like something that would be pretty easy to adapt for the most part, I would have to say.
Oh, no, I completely agree. And if I were to answer this question just straight up off the bat, I would really like to see a movie that's also very plot-focused. Steins Gate. I had a whole lot of fun watching that. There's not an immense amount of story like something like Yu Yu Hakusho, Dragon Ball, Bleach, Naruto, or anything else. But we're going to kind of like go around and we're going to talk about basically what is it that we need to do as filmmakers in the United States in order to capture kind of the essence of making a quality anime movie that would kind of resonate with the film-going audience the same way that comic book movies like DC or Marvel, or even like this new kind of resurgence of maybe video game movies. There's about 50 video game movies in development at this point in time. So anime could be on that level. Anime has that history. It has that kind of dynamic, a really great storytelling, very concise and very epic storytelling, on par with something like Mike likes to talk about, like stuff like Lord of the Rings and everything else. So basically, what do anime movies need in order to be adapted into really interesting concepts for live action American movies? And I'm just gonna like throw it over to Mike. Mike, what do you think is the most proper, interesting thing that they need to bring in when actually adapting an anime?
I mean, that's a really interesting question to ask me. I feel like, and we were kind of discussing this off air a little bit, that a really good thing to bring into the production of a film based on, you know, some original property would be the creator of the original property, so that they can have a little bit of guidance in the production of the film. Because realistically, you know, a lot of the fans are going to say, oh, well, they're just going to bastardize yet another product from Japan. So if you bring in the creator, it kind of eases a lot of that, because the people are automatically going to say, well, the guy who literally created the work in the first place, or the woman, is someone who is going to be helping with the crafting of the work. So naturally, it's going to ease that, and it's going to help them live up to the original intent of that work, as opposed to something, say, like an Avatar: The Last Airbender movie, or a Dragon Ball Evolution, or so many of these films that have just not been done correctly because they have disregarded the source material and the initial creator of that source material, assuming that they were actually willing to work on the film, unless they're, you know, Alan Moore, who is off doing stuff with snakes and magic, you know, with a K.
And there's a lot of things that you can talk about when it comes to bringing in the original creator. One thing I was telling you about this and everyone else is basically manga artists who are the creators of these animes that we actually love. They don't necessarily have a background in storytelling through a visual medium outside of just pictures and comic books to some degree or another. Do you think that these people, especially like the language barrier and everything, the cultural storytelling barriers that come up across when you look at American films and Japanese films, do you think that would be kind of a hindrance of having people who are not necessarily filmmakers coming in and deciding like how to tell a cinematic story? Is that why they don't do it, or they just don't care? They just have the rights to a property, they're going to make it anyway. My idea is the latter.
I mean, that tends to be the case, and it seems like it might be going a little bit more, the pendulum is swinging a little bit more back towards the source material when it comes to films, like, say, with something like a Deadpool, which they just said, screw it, let's do it exactly like what the comics would do or the cartoons would do, and they hit a home run. It depends on how, like, familiar they're with film, obviously, because if they're familiar with how a film flows and how, a story is told through the visual medium of film as opposed to the visual medium of manga or anime, in a more serialized fashion as opposed to the boiled down and compressed nature of film, I think that would be much easier to kind of persuade them. But there could be certain creators that you'd bring in who are just stubborn and say, do not do this, do not do that, do it exactly the way I want to say, where there kind of doesn't end up being any middle ground, and the creator does not necessarily have to be involved, I would say, to necessarily showcase the spirit of a work in a visual format of film. But I feel like it is good if you can find a middle ground where the director will point out certain things that you could include in the films to reference this or that, or to capture the spirit more accurately than I suppose you would have thought so, because I feel like if there's one thing that the creator of a work really has going for them is that they understand the spirit of a work because they're the ones who created it in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Like one thing I was telling you before we actually started doing this was I understand the creator actually has an understanding of the characters in the world that they've actually created themselves, but I don't necessarily think that there is a push or a desperate need to bring in the creator as long as the people creating the adaptation understand what makes the story tick and what drives that story. As I was telling you before, there was this story about William Goldman, who actually wrote Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, who his adaptation, what he said he did was he took the book, he read it again, he highlighted everything he thought was important. He read all of his highlights again and re-highlighted and then re-highlighted and he re-highlighted. And after that, he was left with basically the bare minimum of what this story was about in his mind and what it could be adapted to. And it actually is an interesting idea to bring in someone who might have a different interpretation of that, as long as they still kind of keep it within the realm of what that story is about. They can adjust and adapt what they need to as long as they get the general concept of the story through. We see a lot in literature where we have people like Joe Wright working with Keira Knightley on Atonement or Anna Karenina or Pride and Prejudice or any of these things. He has shown himself to be either incredibly capable or he falters one way or the other in adapting work because you just boil it down to its most basic necessities. And I think that's one of the things that would work really well with film or with anime in adapting into film is taking it and boiling it down to its most basic necessities. But in kind of talking about that, we have to kind of address the elephant in the room is if Americans are making Americanized versions of all these Japanese stories, how important do you think the central location or even the ethnicity of the actors is in order to tell this story? Do you think that, let's say, to give an example, Netflix is making a Death Note movie, which will star a white kid, probably in New York. And I am not a huge fan of that. I feel like in order to tell Death Note in the proper story, it needs to be told in Japan because the Japan setting is incredibly important to that particular story. So what are your thoughts on that? Like setting-wise, actor-wise, do they need to be the certain ethnicity that they are? And when you run into things like maybe Dragon Ball, like what do you do when you run into like the Saiyans? Even though the Saiyans are supposed to be Japanese anyway, they can be whatever they want. What are your thoughts on that?
When it comes down to that, I mean, I feel like anime in general is filled with characters that really can, in many ways, be racially ambiguous. After all, there are a lot of anime characters that we would assume are Japanese that are drawn to look almost Caucasian. So I feel like in many cases, it's really not that big of a deal to cast different ethnicities to play certain roles. And for example, with Death Note. Now, if they decide to not do the story of Kira, and they decide to say, let's do a different story just utilizing the Death Note and go in that direction, I think that would be all right. And the reason why I say that is because that could, say, lead into them eventually doing an actual Death Note movie or movies with the main character, being Kira from the movie, or I mean, from the anime. So I don't really have too big of a problem with them doing that. Of course, there was also a big controversy recently with Scarlett Johansson playing the main role of Ghost in the Shell because she's not Asian. And a lot of people were very upset with that. But the fact of the matter is that I don't really have too much issue with that because she is, in fact, a cyborg. Her mind was transferred from her original body and placed into, like, a different bodies. So I don't think I'd be too big of a problem, with that when it comes to them changing ethnicities. I really don't have a problem. If Goku is played by a white person, a black person, an Asian, I don't think I'm really going to mind as much as long as it's a good actor who puts on a good performance and makes us care. At the end of the day, I don't care what ethnicity the character is or what the setting is. Say if they decide to have Yu Yu Hakusho, I don't know, take place in the United States and Yusuke is like a foreign exchange student, from Japan or something. I don't think that would be too big of a problem. Because the fact of the matter is that as long as they're capturing the same ideas, as long as they are telling the same story, I don't think the location necessarily has to matter unless it's truly ingrained, like, say, Death Note was, because so many of the situations have to do with Japan.
Yeah, I completely agree in terms of actually, taking these issues, taking these ideas that Dragon Ball, Yu Yu Hakusho, Naruto, Bleach, and all that stuff, those things aren't necessarily grounded in one particular area. They're all just kind of made-up cities. Or
Dragon Ball would be really easy, too, because the fact that, like, Dragon Ball is essentially a post-apocalyptic series, or a post-apocalyptic. I mean, the entire civilization of the world was destroyed by King Piccolo, so boom, you could basically have, any city you want to have it take place in, any ethnicity, because it's all mixed. I mean, there's animal people walking around. There could be, different race of characters. I mean, I don't think people are really going to mind at the end of the day. I think that a lot of people initially have the negative reaction to, oh, why is a white person playing an Asian? And certainly, like Doug Walker would point out, whitewashing does exist, and so do different kind of washings, but I think that intention is the biggest thing. And if you're just saying, I'm going to cast this person because I think they're the best actor for the role, I'm just going to say, whatever, do what you have to do. As long as you get people who could really make us care about the characters in a real 3D living, breathing kind of environment, I don't really mind.
In terms of actually the idea of adapting Dragon Ball in terms of like a post-apocalyptic world with kind of a melting pot of people around them where everyone's kind of a different race or something and they don't really adhere to like one race over the other, that would be actually really interesting to see and something Dragon Ball could really pull off if they did it right. And kind of considering like doing it right, I mean, how important do you think, I mean, when it comes to adaptations, especially in this current market or like market of filmmaking and everything, obviously we have people like Marvel and DC and everything, and they have these issues with their cinematic universes or something, and Marvel is really very much a director's medium for their stories, where at the same time it seems like Warner Brothers is doing this completely different thing with DC, and up until very recently, maybe with this new shakeup that's happening, it's been more of a studio base, like this idea that we're going to do something come hell or high water. When it comes to adapting anime, what importance does having like a good director on it, or do you just need to get the script right? I mean, obviously you need to get the tone and texture right. You need someone who can adapt the story and onto screen in a way that actually makes sense for the particular story. But how important is going to be to get the right director working on these particular projects?
Oh, absolutely, it would be important because the director is essentially the eye through which you are peering through the transparent portal into this other universe. I mean, that's how I view film. I mean, you are not looking at a set and you are not looking at actors who are reciting lines that were written by a screenplay writer or a director who is telling them, do it this way. You are supposed to be seeing living, breathing people in a real world environment. And if a director cannot actually pull that off, then it completely destroys the entire work that you're observing because the people cannot buy into it. So I absolutely think that a director is incredibly crucial when it comes to an adaptation, because otherwise you're not going to enjoy the work, and the work is not going to succeed from a business or an artistic standard because you didn't bring in the right artists. Like, you're not going to have Picasso do a sculpture of the Michelangelo's David and have Michelangelo do graffiti on a wall in, you know, Brooklyn. You're not going to have certain people come in and do certain things that they're not really primed for and they're not prepared for and they're not supposed to do. So a director, which is the artist and the visionary, so to speak, of your film and of your world, you got to have the right person or everything is just going to fall apart. Nobody's going to care.
I would actually go and hop of that and say, you know, we talked about Death Note, because Death Note's one of those movies that's actually coming out, and you know that movie's probably going to be fast tracked pretty soon here, especially if Netflix is taking over that one. But we have other movies that have been kind of in development or actually announced either as early as last year or as late as like 2012 or something, with Bleach being announced in 2012, like reaffirmed in 2012. I think it was 2005 or something when they actually said they were going to do it. Who knows if they're still doing that, but Lionsgate's doing Naruto, and there's been reports that they're going to do a Full Metal Alchemist movie with some person. I'm not sure if that's from Japan or from us. I can't necessarily get a whole lot of information on that. There's all this information, and I'm just thinking in terms of just getting the right kind of director on Death Note, because it's one of the last animes that I watched in completion. I would really like to see, and someone I think could actually bring that world and that idea to life in the most cinematic way possible would have to be David Fincher. Just like telling a dark crime drama that has twists and turns and something. I think that he would be a good eye, but at the same time, like, what are your thoughts on this? Is it like, do you think, like, no matter how much money, are these projects or these stories going to be good enough to actually kind of reel in these directors or this incredible talent to work on this stuff? I mean, writers is another thing, producers is another thing, but these directors, do you think that they're good enough? Do you think that anime just has somewhat of a negative connotation to it when it comes to some kind of creative work, that they're not going to be able to pull in these amazing directors? Not that other people don't deserve to make movies and might not or might be right for one role or not, but you know, people who have significant clout, not just like the Guillermo del Toros of the world, who absolutely love anime and would definitely jump on making anything that he found interesting.
Well, yes, I mean, that's a lengthy question, but I believe that what it all boils down to is one film. We don't know what that film is yet, but it is the one breakout film that shatters the mold and that shows that anime is a, you know, kind of well to draw from to also make money from. Like, just like they did with Iron Man and Batman and a lot of these other comic book movies that led the way to inevitably make everything very, you know, profitable like we're seeing today. Although obviously you could trace it back to Blade and X-Men and films of that nature. The fact of the matter is, I think that once one explodes in a big way, studios are going to do the whole thing that they always do and start looking at every single anime and saying, what can we make money with? What do we need to make? And of course, there's going to be that transitionary period, which just happened with comic books and happens with a lot of them, where they test the waters. They don't start out with the big projects right away. They say, okay, we did Death Note. People like that. How about we try something small, like, I don't know, something more like High School of the Dead. People like zombies and they like fan service, you know, and they'll try things like that. And then eventually they'll say, okay, these are making money. Let's start doing things that are a little bit bigger. And they'll do Gundam. And then they'll do something eventually like Dragon Ball. So I feel like it takes time, just like comic books have taken time to where people say, I want to do them. And once they become something that's big, because obviously I doubt every film director in Hollywood, or even most of them, have watched anime. They probably just say, oh, it's just that cartoon. Why do I care about a cartoon from Japan that's for children? But that's how it always goes. Why would I care about some nerdy comic book? Oh, wait, now they're making billions of dollars, you know? So that's how I think it needs to go to kind of immerse people into that kind of culture. Because just like with comic books, they ease their way in. So with this, I think it's got to ease its way in with How about Ghost in the Shell? How about Death Note on Netflix? Netflix, not in theaters where they have to take a much bigger stake and have a lot more money that they have to pay to all the distributors and figure all that stuff out. How about Netflix? That's free on your TV. Oh, $9.99 a month, whatever. And I feel like one of the big ones, though, that could happen is Pokemon. And Pokemon, they have discussed making a live-action film recently. It's been shopped around. They want to do it. I think that could not only open the gates for anime, but video game films as well. Because if Pokemon explodes in popularity again as a film, then everyone's going to say, well, this was a big anime. Let's go check that out. This was a big video game. They're actually working now after all these years of messing it up. Let's try it again. So I think that's really what they need.
That would be actually really interesting, considering the influx of movies based on video games that we're going to be getting, and especially with Ubisoft trying to be the new Marvel in terms of adapting their personal video game material into somewhat of a shared universe. I mean, that's the rumor. Obviously, we don't necessarily.
Yeah, they're doing The Division with Jake Gyllenhaal, right?
Yeah, and also Splinter Cell with Tom Hardy.
Oh yeah, they've been talking about that for years. Like, where is that movie?
But it's going. These things are going to come. But the thing is that's a really interesting question, and also this whole idea that if they explode, they're going to explode in a slow, methodical way. And I want to ask, because honestly, I don't think we're getting a little bit past this kind of concept. Comic books have changed our concept of what it means to create a franchise, with everyone jumping on the universal, the cinematic universe train, where Transformers and Underworld and the Universal Monsters and DC and all these other comic book, they all want to do these cinematic universes. And I'm not saying it doesn't work, but I'm saying, are we even at a point anymore where one of these movies is going to blow up and they're going to be like, okay, well, that was a huge thing. Well, let's just wait and see. Or is something going to blow up and it's like, oh my God, we need to make Dragon Ball cinematic universe, and just like jump into it way too quickly, spend way too much money and tank it, or Gundam or something else, like one of these huge epic stories, Naruto, Bleach, and completely just tank the entire concept to once again just clear the playing field of maybe we shouldn't touch that, we don't do it right, or people are just not very enthusiastic, right? Even though the problem will probably be that the fact that they just didn't do it right, they jumped into the water too quickly.
I think it all comes down to execution. Because obviously you execute it right, things work. You execute it wrong, things fail catastrophically and you lose billions of dollars. I mean, that's just how it is. I mean, with the Power Rangers movie, for example, there was that report from, the executive producer who said that, oh, we want to have 9 films or something. So a lot of people are just jumping in there immediately and saying, let's have all these sequels. And movies nowadays are coming out and they're announcing the sequel before the movie's even in theaters yet, and they know if it's going to succeed or not. Like, they even did that with Fantastic Four and then they took it off the slate. So it really depends on how they develop everything and how they execute it, because execution is more important than doing stuff on paper and in theory. Because once you execute something, you did it. It's finite. It's in reality. It's something that we all observe and we're all going to see. You can't really take it back unless you reshoot the whole movie, and movies are so expensive that you really cannot do that. So I think it really comes down to that. But just as it takes a little while to get into them, it takes a while to go out. So, for example, if Marvel starts to have some bombs, they're not going to stop right away. They might kind of reorganize a little bit. They might kind of go in this direction or that direction. But it takes time to wind down, just as it takes time often to kind of speed up. And I feel like audiences, they always go in this direction. You kind of have to slowly put them in this, certain things like Lord of the Rings kind of came out of nowhere and kicked it off. So a lot of times you have to have that Matrix, Lord of the Rings, Dark Knight movie that just makes it explode in that way. But again, it all comes down to execution, because they could have hired Woody Allen to do Lord of the Rings. And, where would that have been? I mean, I guess that he would play Frodo and he'd just be complaining the whole time about how neurotic he is. I don't really know. And he'd be having a relationship with the exact same woman he had a relationship in 50 other movies. I mean, what would it be?
I mean, yeah, I understand where you're coming from, and I think a lot of people do. But anyway, I think this is kind of going along. We've covered a whole lot of ground here, guys. If you've stayed with us, thank you so much. I want you to go into the comment section below and answer a couple questions for me. I want you to not only, like, from the beginning of this video, not only tell me what you would like to see adapted, but I wanted you to tell me who you would like to see direct it, who you would like to see write it, who would you like to see star in it, and all the other stuff you can think of about that particular project.
Well, I think that I already have an answer for you for Dragon Ball.
Okay.
Director, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Goku actor, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Gohan actor, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Chi-Chi actor, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Bulma actor, Arnold Schwarzenegger. That would be great.
That would be good. You forgot Yamcha though. I think actually.
Well, that's the one role that Arnold couldn't play because Arnold couldn't convincingly lose that often that one-sidedly.
Exactly. I feel like that's actually a really good point to be made. But anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this discussion. We talked about a whole lot here. Anyway, Mike, thank you so much for joining me on this discussion. It was a good one, I thought.
Yeah, me too. I enjoyed it. Hopefully I'll be back for another one.
Yeah, definitely, man. We have something really special kind of jumping off of this video, hopefully, in the next couple weeks here. So anyway, guys, hope y'all all have a good day. Do not forget to rate, comment, and subscribe. Mike's channel will be in the description below. If you haven't checked him out yet, I highly suggest you do because he makes amazing content, not just Dragon Ball, but movie reviews and everything else. Anyway, have a nice day, everyone. Bye.
See ya.